Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku focused only on speed. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The train rattled rhythmically against the tracks, a low, metallic hum that usually lulled passengers to sleep. For Izuku Midoriya, however, the vibration felt like a countdown. He sat rigidly in his seat, his hero costume case clutched between his knees so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Outside the window, the urban sprawl of Tokyo was thinning out into the older, grittier districts of Yamanashi Prefecture, but Izuku wasn't seeing the buildings. He was seeing the X-rays, shattered bones, purple bruising, ligaments strained to the snapping point. He looked down at his right hand. The scars were still fresh, angry red lines tracing the history of his incompetence. Recovery Girl's voice echoed in his head, grim and final. If you continue like this, you will lose the use of your arms permanently. Permanently, Izuku whispered, the word tasting like ash. He had one for all. He had the power of the symbol of peace. But every time he tried to use it, he turned himself into a glass cannon that shattered upon firing. The sports festival had been a wake-up call, but the aftermath was a lingering nightmare. He couldn't keep fighting like All Might. He literally wasn't built for it. All Might was a fortress of muscle, a man who could change the weather with a punch. Izuku was small, compact, and he was terrified. The train announced his stop. Izuku jolted, grabbing his case. He was heading to an internship with a hero named Gran Torino, a man All Might, the fearless, invincible All Might, had spoken of with visible tremors of terror. He was my homeroom teacher, All Might had said, looking pale. I survived him. Barely. Izuku stepped onto the platform, the air in this part of town smelling of rust and old frying oil. It was a ghost town compared to the bustling center of Muzurifu. The address on his slip led him away from the main streets, down winding alleys where the buildings leaned inward as if conspiring against the pedestrians. He found the building. It was a decrepit two-story structure that looked one stiff breeze away from collapse. This is the place? Izuku muttered. He checked the address again. It matched. He swallowed his nerves, walked up the creaking stairs, and knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. The door creaked open. It hadn't been locked. Hello? I'm Izuku Midoriya from Yei High. Silence greeted him. Izuku stepped into the gloom. The room was messy, cluttered with boxes and old furniture. And there, lying face down in a pool of red liquid, was a small, elderly man. Izuku's heart stopped. Oh my God! Sir! Someone call an ambulance! He dropped his case and scrambled forward, panic overriding his senses. He reached for the body, his mind already racing through CPR protocols, when the corpse suddenly jerked upright. I'm alive! The old man barked, wiping the red liquid from his chin. Damn sausages! Ketchup gets everywhere. Izuku froze, mid-lunge. Ketchup? The old man blinked, his eyes wide and slightly manic. Who are you? I'm Izuku Midoriya. Izuku stammered, standing up and dusting off his knees, feeling foolish. I'm here for the internship? All Might send me? All Might? The old man scratched his head. Who's that? Izuku felt a cold stone drop in his stomach. Is he senile? Did All Might send me to a hero who's lost his mind? Tashinori Yagi? The symbol of peace? You offered the internship, Tashinori. The old man's eyes narrowed, the fog of senility vanishing instantly, replaced by a razor-sharp glint that sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. Ah. The stiff one. So you're the ninth. The shift in demeanor was so abrupt it gave Izuku whiplash. Gran Torino stood up. He was tiny, shorter than Izuku, but the way he stood, balanced perfectly on the balls of his feet, suggested a coiled energy that belied his age. Bring your costume, Gran Torino commanded, walking toward the kitchenette. Let's see what the holder of one for all can do. Don't disappoint me, kid. I don't have much patience for slow learners. 10 minutes later, Izuku stood in the center of the cluttered living room, clad in his green hero suit. He felt ridiculous. The room was barely 20 feet across. There was no space to move, let alone fight. Go on then, Gran Torino said, standing casually by the microwave. Come at me. Izuku hesitated. Sir, the room, it's too small. And if I use my quirk, I might destroy the building. Or myself. Excuses, Gran Torino scoffed. Tashinori said you were a crybaby, but he didn't mention you were a coward. You can't control your power, can you? I can. Izuku defended, though his voice wavered. But only at 100%. If I use it, I break. Then don't use 100%, Gran Torino said simply. Figure it out. Hit me, Izuku gritted his teeth. He wants to see what I can do. Fine, he focused. He channeled the feeling of the egg in the microwave, the visualization he had used before. He tightened his fist, feeling the familiar, terrifying surge of power accumulate in his right arm. The red veins of one for all glowed beneath his skin. Smash! He swung. It was a telegraphed, desperate punch. He aimed to pull it at the last second to avoid killing the old man, but he needed to show speed. Izuku blinked. Gran Torino wasn't there. A sharp pain exploded in the back of Izuku's head. His face met the floorboards with a dull thud. Too slow, Gran Torino's voice came from the ceiling. Izuku scrambled up, looking around frantically. The old man was bouncing, literally bouncing. Jets of air fired from the soles of his feet, propelling him around the room like a pinball. Walls, ceiling, floor, it didn't matter. He was a yellow and white blur. Your eyes are looking at where I was, Gran Torino taunted, his voice echoing from every corner of the room. You're fighting a memory. Predict. Anticipate. Izuku tried to track him. He spun, swinging his arm again, but the movement was sluggish, heavy. He was trying to wield a sledgehammer against a mosquito. Gran Torino ricocheted off the bookshelf and slammed a boot into Izuku's stomach. The air left Izuku's lungs in a wheeze, and he collapsed, clutching his gut. The red glow on his arm faded. Gran Torino landed softly on the table, looking down at him with disappointment. That's it? The old man asked. That's the power of one for all. Izuku gasped for air, shame burning his face hotter than the physical pain. I told you. I can't control it. No, Gran Torino said, hopping down. He walked over to Izuku and poked him in the forehead with his cane. You can't control it because your admiration is shackles. You're trying to be All Might, but you aren't All Might. You're a scrawny kid with a power too big for his vessel. Gran Torino turned and shuffled toward the kitchen. You're stiff. Your mind is stiff. You think of the power as something you summon for a special attack. A smash. Do you only breathe when you need to talk? Do you only circulate blood when you need to run? He opened the microwave and threw in a plate of frozen taiyaki. One for all isn't a weapon you draw from a holster, kid. It's the engine. Until you realize that, you'll just be a broken doll. That night, Izuku couldn't sleep. The apartment was filled with the rhythmic snoring of the old hero. But Izuku sat awake in the corner assigned to him, staring at the moonlight filtering through the dusty window. He held a cold can of soda against the bruise on his cheek. It's the engine. The words replayed in his mind. He thought about the microwave. The egg. If you don't lower the wattage, the egg explodes. But if you lower it too much, it doesn't cook. Izuku sat up, pulling his notebook out of his bag. He flipped past the pages and pages of All Might analysis. Sketches of the Detroit Smash, the Texas Smash. All of them relied on planting the feet, twisting the hip, and delivering massive, devastating force through the upper body. Force. He wrote the equation down in the margin. F equals mxa. Force equals mass times acceleration. All Might had Massachusetts. He was huge. When he punched, he had the weight of a truck behind him. Even without one for all, a punch from All Might would hurt. Add the accelerator of the quirk, and you got a natural disaster. Izuku looked at his own arms. They were thin. Scarred. Even with training, his mass was negligible compared to a villain like Muscular or a hero like All Might. I can't increase my mass, Izuku whispered to himself. And my durability is low. If I try to output the same force as All Might, my body tears itself apart because the recoil has nowhere to go. He looked at his legs. He pulled up his pant leg. His legs were different. While his arms were damaged, his legs were strong from years of running, from carrying all might on the beach, from the endless squats. Gran Torino doesn't punch hard, Izuku realized. He hit me today, and it hurt, but it didn't break my ribs. He didn't use force. He used momentum. Izuku closed his eyes. He imagined the power of one for all not as a pool of water gathering in his fist, but as electricity. Current. Don't hold it in. Let it flow. If he spread the power, just 5%, the amount he could handle without breaking, throughout his entire body constantly, he wouldn't need to switch it on to punch. He would just be strong. He stood up in the silent room. He took a breath. He visualized the switch. But instead of flipping it for a second, he imagined turning a dimmer switch just slightly and leaving it there. Green lightning crackled around him. It didn't pool in his arm. It skittered across his skin, from his neck to his toes. His hair floated slightly. He felt lighter. The constant hum of energy was terrifying, like holding a live wire, but it wasn't painful. Full cowling, he whispered. He took a step. Or he meant to. He twitched his leg muscle to step forward, but the 5% power amplified the movement instantly. He shot forward, slamming face first into the opposite wall. Thump. Gran Torino snorted in his sleep but didn't wake up. Izuku slid down the wall, rubbing his nose. But he was smiling. He hadn't broken anything. He had just moved fast. Too fast. He looked at the small room again. Gran Torino moved by bouncing. He used the walls and ceiling as floors. He was a human pinball. A rubber ball, Izuku murmured. When a rubber ball hits a wall, it doesn't try to break the wall. It deforms, stores the energy, and releases it to change direction. It maintains its speed. I've been trying to be a cannonball, Izuku thought, tracing the scars on his hand. Trying to smash through walls. But I'm not heavy enough. He looked at his red shoes. If I can't be a cannonball, I have to be a bullet. No, a ricochet. The next morning, Gran Torino found Izuku outside in the narrow alley behind the apartment building. The sun was barely up. You're up early, the old man grumbled, leaning on his cane. Give up yet? Izuku turned. He was vibrating. The green lightning was constant, wrapping around him like a second skin. His stance was different. Usually Izuku stood with his fists raised, mimicking All Might's boxing stance. Now Izuku was crouched low. His hands were open, relaxed at his sides, but his legs were tense like springs. I want to try something, Izuku said. Gran Torino's eyebrows shot up. He sensed a change. The air around the kid felt different. Less desperate. More kinetic. Show me, Gran Torino said, dropping his cane. Time for morning warm-ups. Try to grab my cape. Gran Torino vanished. In the past, Izuku would have flinched. He would have looked for the attack. But Izuku wasn't looking to counterattack. Don't fight him. Race him. Gran Torino appeared on Izuku's right, aiming a swift kick to the ribs. Izuku didn't block. He didn't try to catch the leg. Instead, he kicked the ground. Explode. Using 5% of one for all solely for propulsion, Izuku launched himself backward. It wasn't graceful. He flew back too fast, his back hitting the brick wall of the alley. Don't stop! Izuku screamed internally. If you stop, you lose the momentum. As his back hit the wall, Izuku didn't crumple. He bent his knees against the vertical brick surface, treating the wall like the floor. He coiled and sprang again. Whoosh! He shot diagonally across the alley, passing over Gran Torino's head. Gran Torino's eyes widened. Oh! The old hero blasted his jets, chasing Izuku into the air. Not bad, kid! But moving in straight lines makes you a target. Gran Torino intercepted Izuku in midair, batting him down toward the pavement. Izuku saw the ground rushing up. Impact imminent. If he landed normally, he'd have to bend his knees, absorb the shock, and stop. Then he'd have to start running again. That split second of stopping was when he would die in a real fight. Roll. Izuku hit the pavement but tucked his shoulder. He used the momentum of the fall to roll forward, springing back onto his feet without losing speed. He was a blur of green motion. He wasn't attacking. He was just running. But in the tight confines of the alley, his running was erratic, bouncing off trash cans, fire escapes, and walls. You figured out how to keep the switch on, Gran Torino observed, now hopping along the fire escapes, keeping pace easily. But you're loud. You're stomping. You're wasting energy on friction. I know, Izuku yelled, panting. I'm not used to the speed. Your eyes, Gran Torino shouted, swooping down. Your body is moving faster than your brain can process. Look ahead. Don't look at where you're stepping, look at where you're going to be 3 steps from now, Izuku tried. He focused his eyes. The world was streaming by in streaks of color. The trash can. The dumpster. The wall. Jump. Wall. Kick. Pipe. Swing. It was a rhythm. A chaotic, high-speed dance. Izuku pushed harder. He felt the percentage creep up. 6%? 7%? His legs burned, but it was a good burn. It wasn't the sharp snap of breaking bones. He saw Gran Torino ahead, waiting on top of a vending machine. I can't beat him in a fight, Izuku realized. His combat experience is too high. But if I focus everything on velocity, Izuku ran at the wall adjacent to the vending machine. He ran up it 3 steps, defying gravity with pure momentum, and pushed off, spinning in the air. He extended a hand, not to punch, but to tag. Gran Torino grinned and hopped backward effortlessly. Izuku's hand swiped empty air. Izuku landed, skidding on his soles, smoke rising from his red sneakers. He was gasping for air, sweat dripping down his nose. I missed, Izuku wheezed. Gran Torino hopped down. He looked at the scuff marks on the wall where Izuku had run. You missed, the old man agreed. But yesterday, you were a statue. Today, you're a runaway train. Gran Torino walked over and inspected Izuku's shoes. Your soles are melting. Izuku looked down. The rubber treads were shredded. The friction of stopping and turning at those speeds was too much for standard hero gear. You're trying to copy my movements, Gran Torino noted. But I have jets. I can change direction in midair using air pressure. You have to use physical surfaces. You're a ricochet. A rubber ball, Izuku corrected, standing up straight. The green lightning faded, but the energy in his eyes remained. I realized. I can't be All Might. I can't stand there and trade punches. If I get hit, I lose. So I just have to make sure I'm never where the attack lands. Gran Torino hummed, a sound of begrudging approval. Speed over power. Evasion over durability. It's a valid strategy. Annoying to fight against. But, the old man suddenly kicked Izuku in the shin. Hard. Ow. It doesn't matter how fast you are if you can't hit back. Gran Torino barked. You're a fast target, but you're still just a target. You need to learn how to turn that speed into force. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? Izuku nodded, rubbing his shin. You don't have the mass, Gran Torino said, poking Izuku's chest. So you need massive acceleration. If you hit something at 50 miles per hour, it hurts. If you hit it at 300, it breaks. We have 1 week. I'm going to teach you how to move until you puke. And then I'm going to teach you how to hit things without breaking your twig legs. The next 3 days were a blur. Literally. Izuku learned that there was a massive difference between running fast and combat agility. Running fast was easy. Full cowling made him an Olympic sprinter instantly. Combat agility was hell. It required spatial awareness that Izuku didn't have yet. He crashed into walls. He tripped over his own feet. He misjudged distances and flew face first into dumpsters. Gran Torino was relentless. He chased Izuku through the city at night, forcing him to navigate complex urban terrain, rooftops, narrow alleys, crowded streets, without stopping. Don't think! Gran Torino would yell, nipping at Izuku's heels. Flow! Water doesn't stop to think about a rock, it flows around it. Izuku began to change his style. He stopped making fists. He kept his hands open, using them to vault, to swing, to balance. He lowered his center of gravity. He realized that his legs were his engine, but his arms were his rudders. By the 4th day, the vomiting stopped. Izuku's inner ear had finally adjusted to the G-forces. He stood in the living room again. The furniture had been pushed to the sides. Final exam before we hit the streets for Rio Patrol, Gran Torino said. He was wearing his cape. 3 minutes. If you can land one clean hit on me, not a touch, a hit, you pass. Izuku took a deep breath. He tightened the laces on his shredded sneakers. He had duct-taped the soles for now. Ready, Izuku said. Begin. Gran Torino launched. He was faster than before. He wasn't holding back as much. He zigzagged around the room, creating a vacuum that pulled papers off the desk. Izuku activated full cowl. 5%. No. Push it. He felt the hum. 6%. 7%. The pain in his legs flared, a warning heat, but he ignored it. Gran Torino came from the left. Izuku didn't block. He dropped to the floor, sliding under the kick, and used his hand to pivot on the ground, swinging his legs around like a breakdancer. Gran Torino bounced off the ceiling and dove. Izuku jumped. Not away, but toward the wall. He planted his feet on the floral wallpaper. Spring. He launched himself horizontally, intercepting Gran Torino's path. Gran Torino adjusted in midair with a burst of air, dodging Izuku by an inch. Too linear. Izuku flew past him, heading straight for the opposite wall. In the past, he would have panicked. Now, he prepared. He hit the opposite wall feet first. His knees bent, compressing. Force equals mass x acceleration. He didn't have mass. But he had the stored kinetic energy of his flight across the room. Don't absorb the shock. Return it. Izuku pushed off instantly. He was a human bullet. The wall cracked behind him from the force of his launch. He was moving faster than he had ever moved in his life. The room was a tunnel. Gran Torino was in the center, still recovering from his mid-air dodge. Gran Torino's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the rebound to be that instant. Izuku didn't punch. He spun his body in the air, building centrifugal force. He extended his right leg, swinging it like a baseball bat. Smash? No. Impact. His heel connected with Gran Torino's crossed arms. Boom. The sound was deafening in the small apartment. A shockwave rattled the windows. Gran Torino was launched backward, smashing through his own coffee table and skidding into the kitchenette, denting the refrigerator door. Izuku landed in a crouch, his chest heaving. Smoke curled from his leg. Silence. Izuku stood up, panic suddenly replacing the adrenaline. Gran Torino! Oh God, I used too much. Are you okay? Groaning came from the kitchen pile. The old man pushed a piece of broken table off his chest. He stood up, dusting off his suit. He rubbed his forearms. There was a bruise forming already. Gran Torino looked at the dented fridge. Then he looked at Izuku. A slow, terrifying grin spread across the old hero's face. Heh. Gran Torino chuckled, then laughed. Heh heh. That hurt, kid. That actually hurt. He walked over, limp slightly less pronounced than usual. You used the wall to double your speed. You turned yourself into a projectile. I call it a ricochet, Izuku stammered. Ricochet. Gran Torino tasted the word. Fitting. It's dangerous. If you miss, you're flying into a wall at 60 miles an hour. You'll crack your skull. I know, Izuku said. He looked at his hands. They were trembling, but they weren't broken. His legs throbbed, but they held him up. But I can fight like this. I don't have to be the symbol of peace who stands like a pillar. I can be the wind, Gran Torino finished. Or a storm. The old man walked to the phone. Pack your bag. We're going to Hosu. Hosu? Izuku asked. Why Hosu? Because sitting in an apartment won't teach you how to use that speed on uneven terrain, Gran Torino said. And because the hero killer has been sighted there. Don't worry, we aren't hunting him. We're just going to run some patrols. See if you can keep up with me in a real city. Izuku nodded, rushing to grab his bag. As he packed, he felt his phone buzz. It was a text from Ida. I have found him. The hero killer is in Hosu. I will avenge Tensei. Izuku's blood ran cold. The triumph of his training evaporated instantly. Gran Torino, Izuku said, his voice tight. We need to go. Now. Impatient, aren't you? Gran Torino grabbed his cane. Try not to leave me in the dust, kid. Izuku looked at his legs. The green sparks flickered to life. Ready. I'll try, Izuku said, and for the first time, he wasn't wondering if he could be a hero. He was calculating the vectors. He was calculating the fastest route to Hosu. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't a tank, he was the rubber ball. And once he started moving, nothing was going to stop him. The air in Hosu's city tasted of ozone and impending rain. It was a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, the kind that pressed against the skin and made the fine hairs on the back of one's neck stand up in anticipation. Izuku Midoriya sat across from Gran Torino on the bullet train, his leg bouncing up and down with a nervous, rhythmic energy that he couldn't quite suppress. His new costume, or rather, the slightly modified version of his gym uniform with the reinforced iron soles he'd hastily requested from the support company catalog, felt stiff, stopped vibrating. Kid, Gran Torino grunted, not opening his eyes. You're shaking the whole car. Sorry, Izuku murmured, forcing his leg to still. I'm just thinking about the patrol. About the movements we practiced. Thinking is your problem, the old hero retorted. You overthink. You analyze. In a classroom, that makes you top of the class. At high speeds? It makes you roadkill. At the velocity we're aiming for, by the time you think about dodging, you've already been hit. You need to let your nervous system take the wheel. Izuku nodded, looking out the window. The city lights were blurring past, but to his eyes, honed by 3 days of tracking Gran Torino's supersonic pinball routine, they looked distinct. He could count the street lamps. He could see the individual windows on the passing buildings. One for all was humming beneath his skin, a constant, low-level thrum at 5%. He didn't turn it off anymore. Gran Torino had insisted on it. It's not a suit you put on, he had said. It's your skin. Wear it. As the train began its deceleration into Hosu Station, Izuku felt a strange tightening in his chest. It wasn't just the patrol. It was Ida. Tenya Ida had been off. Quiet. Robotically polite, but with a cold, hollow look in his eyes that Izuku recognized from the mirror in the days before he met All Might. It was the look of someone staring into a precipice. Gran Torino, Izuku started, do you think? Boom. The sentence died in his throat. The side of the train car ahead of them exploded inward. Metal shrieked, glass shattered into a million glittering diamonds, and the world tilted violently. Izuku was moving before his conscious mind registered the threat. He kicked off his seat, grabbing the railing and using the centrifugal force of the train's lurch to swing himself into the aisle, shielding a nearby passenger from flying debris. Villains! Someone screamed. Through the gaping hole in the train car, a monstrosity stepped in. It was a Nomu. But not the one from the USJ. This one was leaner, darker, its exposed brain pulsating with a sickening rhythm. Stay back! A hero shouted, charging the beast. The Nomu backhanded him with casual cruelty, sending the man flying through the opposite window. Sit down, kid! Gran Torino's voice was a bark of command. The old man was already a blur of yellow and white. He ricocheted off the luggage rack, slamming his boots into the Nomu's face with a sonic crack, driving the creature out of the train and onto the platform. The train screeched to a halt. Panic erupted. Gran Torino! Izuku yelled, running to the hole in the wall. Stay here! Gran Torino shouted back, engaging the beast on the platform. You're not ready for this. Evacuate the civilians! Izuku hesitated. The hero instinct screamed at him to jump down and fight. But he looked around the car. People were bleeding. People were terrified. Priority 1, safety. Everyone, please move to the rear cars. Izuku shouted, his voice cracking slightly before finding its steel. Keep your heads down. Move. He ushered them out, using his speed to clear debris from the aisles. Once the car was empty, he leaped onto the platform. Gran Torino was gone, the battle having moved into the city streets. Fires were already starting to bloom against the night sky, painting the clouds in shades of bruised purple and orange. Izuku landed on the concrete. He looked toward the chaos. Then he froze. He wasn't thinking about the Nomu. He was thinking about Ida, Hosu City. The hero killer. Ida took an internship here specifically. He didn't choose a famous agency. He chose the location. Oh no, Izuku whispered. The realization hit him with more force than a smash. He's not patrolling. He's hunting. Izuku pulled out his phone. No messages. He opened the Hero Network app, scanning for reports. Chaos everywhere. Multiple nomis. But the hero killer operated in the shadows, away from the loud noises. Think. If I were Stain, where would I be? Dark alleys. Dead ends. Places where screams don't carry. If I were Ida, where would I look? Izuku looked at the burning city center, then turned his back on it. He looked toward the quieter, older district near the station. The layout of Hosu was a grid, but the older sections were a maze of narrow passages. I have to find him, Izuku said, the green lightning sparking around his legs. I have to be fast. He didn't run down the street. That was inefficient. There were people, cars, obstacles. He looked up. The buildings in this district were tightly packed, 4 or 5 stories high. Izuku crouched. He channeled the power into his calves. The concrete beneath his iron soles cracked. Launch. He shot upward, scaling the side of the station building in 3 bounds, his fingers gripping the masonry for mere fractions of a second to guide his ascent. He vaulted over the lip of the roof and didn't stop. He began to run. To an observer on the ground, he would have been invisible. A gust of wind. A shadow passing over the moon. Izuku leaped from rooftop to rooftop, clearing 20-foot gaps with effortless grace. Faster, he urged himself. Faster. He wasn't running with the heavy, stomping gait of a power type anymore. He was gliding. He landed on the balls of his feet, his knees bending to absorb the impact, and immediately recycling that energy into the next jump. It was a flow state. Search pattern alpha. Scan the alleys? He didn't stop to look. He looked while moving. As he leaped over an alleyway, his eyes, enhanced by the focus of One for All, snapped down, processing the visual data in milliseconds. Empty. Empty. Dumpster. Stray cat. Empty. He covered 4 blocks in 30 seconds. Then, he saw it. It wasn't a visual. It was a sound. The distinct clang of metal on metal, echoing up from a narrow, dead-end alleyway 2 blocks over. Izuku pivoted. He didn't slow down to turn. He grabbed a ventilation pipe, swung around it to kill his forward momentum, and launched himself at a 90-degree angle toward the sound. Please be okay. Please be okay. He reached the edge of the roof overlooking the alley. He looked down. The scene froze in his mind like a photograph. Native, the pro-hero, slumped against the wall, bleeding. Tenya Ida, lying on the ground, his sword armor shattered, his face pressed into the dirty asphalt, eyes wide with terror and rage. And standing over him, a blade raised for the killing blow, was the hero killer, Stain. The jagged katana glinted in the dim light. There was no time to scream. No time to announce his presence. No time to charge up a smash. Gravity was his engine. Izuku stepped off the ledge. He didn't fall, he dove. He streamlined his body, minimizing air resistance. As he plummeted 4 stories, he locked his eyes on Stain's sword. Force equals mass x acceleration. He didn't have the mass to crush Stain. But he had the velocity of a falling object. Stain, possessing the uncanny instincts of a serial killer, sensed the disturbance in the air pressure above him. He looked up, his eyes widening behind his mask. Most heroes would have landed, shouted stop, and then engaged. Izuku didn't land. He spun in the air, a vertical corkscrew. He didn't aim for Stain's body. Stain was too sturdy, too likely to counter. Izuku aimed for the flat of the blade. Clang! Izuku's iron soul connected with the katana just inches from Ida's neck. The impact was precise and violent. The sword didn't break, but the sheer kinetic force of the kick knocked the weapon out of Stain's grip, sending it skittering across the pavement, sparking as it went. Izuku used the impact on the sword to recoil. He didn't land next to Ida. He bounced off the ground, ricocheted off the left wall, then the right wall, and finally landed in a crouch 10 feet away, placing himself between the killer and his friend. The entire sequence, from roof to landing, took less than 2 seconds. Silence reigned in the alley. Stain looked at his empty hand, then at the sword lying 20 feet away, then at the green-haired boy crouching before him. Midoriya. Ida croaked, his voice thick with tears and paralysis. Don't get involved. This is my fight. You can't move, Izuku said. His voice wasn't shaky. It was flat, focused. He didn't look back at Ida. He kept his eyes locked on Stain's center of mass. So it's not a fight. It's an execution, Stain chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. He reached for a secondary knife on his belt. A child? And a fast one. Good entrance. You saved your friend's life, for the moment. The killer's aura flared, a palpable bloodlust that usually paralyzed lesser heroes with fear alone. Izuku felt it. It was cold and slimy, like stepping into a freezer full of corpses. But Izuku was already moving. He wasn't moving forward. He was bouncing in place, shifting his weight from foot to foot so rapidly that he appeared to be vibrating. Analysis. Quirk, blood curdle. Activation requires ingesting blood. Vector, bladed weapons. When conditioned, do not get cut. Not even a scratch. Stain is fast. He killed pros. He's used to people trying to block him. I don't listen to fake heroes, Stain growled, licking his lips. And I don't listen to children who interfere with my duty. Stain lunged. It was a burst of speed that defied human limits. The knife slashed horizontally, aiming for Izuku's throat. Too slow. Izuku didn't duck. He fell backward, letting gravity take him, the blade passing millimeters above his nose. As his hands touched the pavement, he pushed off, turning the fall into a back handspring. But he didn't reset to a neutral stance. As his feet touched the ground, he immediately exploded sideways. Wall check. He hit the alley wall 6 feet up, stuck for a microsecond, and launched himself at Stain from the side. Stain pivoted, bringing a third dagger up to stab. Izuku saw the tip of the blade. In his mind, he drew a line of trajectory. He twisted his body in midair, a barrel roll that wrapped around the thrust. He didn't punch Stain. He didn't have the leverage. Instead, as he flew past, he snapped a low kick at Stain's ankle. Smack. It wasn't a bone-breaking blow, but it was placed perfectly at the moment Stain was shifting his weight. The hero killer stumbled, his balance compromised. Izuku landed on the opposite wall, clinging to a drainpipe like a tree frog. Ida? Izuku shouted, his voice echoing. What's his quirk detail? How does he stop you? Blood. Ida yelled, tears streaming down his face. If he licks your blood, you're paralyzed. Understood. So it is a game of tag, Izuku thought. If he tags me once, I die. Stain recovered his balance, his eyes narrowing. You hop around like a rabbit. Is that your heroism? Running away? I'm not running away, Izuku said. He pushed off the drainpipe. I'm changing the angle, Izuku dove. Stain slashed upward. Izuku kicked the air, using the wind pressure of a 10% flick of his toes, to alter his trajectory downward, landing behind Stain. Stain spun, slashing blindly behind him. Izuku was already gone. He had ricocheted off a dumpster, and was now above Stain. Full cowl, agility mode. The alleyway became a containment chamber for a high-velocity particle. Izuku ceased to be a solid object in the eyes of the observer. He became a green streak, a blur that zipped from wall to ground to fire escape to wall. Squeak, 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 squeak. The sound of his rubber soles gripping and releasing the concrete was a frantic rhythm. Stain stood in the center, turning, slashing, stabbing. But he was fighting a phantom. Every time he swung, Izuku was already rebounding off a surface behind him. I can't hit him hard, Izuku realized as he bounced off a brick wall. If I stop to load up a 100% smash, or even a 20% punch, I have to plant my feet. If I plant my feet, he cuts me, so I don't plant my feet. Ever. Izuku flew past Stain's right side, delivering a stinging slap to the villain's ear. He rebounded off the ground, kicking Stain in the back of the knee. He pushed off the wall, elbowing Stain in the shoulder. It was death by 1,000 cuts, but without the blade. Annoying fly! Stain roared, losing his composure. He threw 3 throwing knives in a spread pattern. Izuku saw them coming. He couldn't dodge all 3 in the air. Improvise. Izuku grabbed a loose lid from a metal trash can as he passed it. He held it up like a buckler. Clang. Clang. 2 knives deflected. The third grazed the metal rim. Izuku threw the lid at Stain's face like a frisbee and used the distraction to close the distance. He slid between Stain's legs, a baseball slide, and kicked upward with both feet. The impact caught Stain in the chin. The villain's head snapped back, and he stumbled into the wall. Izuku skidded to a halt 10 feet away, panting. Sweat was stinging his eyes. His legs were burning. The constant direction changes were tearing at his muscles. He was operating at maximum aerobic capacity. Stain spat out a glob of bloody saliva. He looked at Izuku with a mix of hatred and something else. Analysis. You have power, Stain rasped. But you refuse to trade blows. You know you're weak. I know I'm not invincible, Izuku corrected, wiping sweat from his forehead. So I don't pretend to be. Midoriya! Ida yelled. Get out of here. He's too strong. I can't let you bleed for my sake. Shut up, Ida. Izuku snapped, surprising both of them. He didn't look away from Stain. If you want to die, do it on your own time. But as long as I'm here, no one dies. That's what a hero does. Stain's eyes narrowed. Hero. You have the conviction. But conviction without strength is meaningless. Stain sheathed his knife and drew the katana he had retrieved during the skirmish. He changed his stance. He lowered his center of gravity. You're fast, Stain said softly. But you're linear. You bounce. Walls. Floor. Ceiling. Angles. Izuku tensed. I can read angles, Stain whispered. The villain surged forward. This time, he didn't aim for Izuku. He slashed the wall Izuku was about to jump to. Izuku launched, and realized his landing spot was a shower of sparks and debris. He flinched, adjusting his landing. That microsecond of hesitation was what Stain needed. Stain was there. The blade came down. Izuku couldn't dodge. He was in midair, his momentum killed by the hesitation. Move! Move! A wall of ice erupted between them. The katana slammed into the glacial barrier, chipping the ice but failing to penetrate. The cold air blasted through the alley, instantly lowering the temperature. Izuku fell back, landing on his butt, scrambling away. At the entrance of the alley, standing with his phone in one hand and his left side engulfed in flames, was Shoto Todoroki. Midoriya, Todoroki said, his voice calm, bordering on bored. You send a location drop with no context? You're lucky I was nearby. Todoroki. Izuku scrambled up, relief washing over him so strongly his knees almost buckled. Don't let him cut you. If he licks your blood, you're paralyzed. Blood, Todoroki mused, stepping forward, the ice spreading from his right foot like a creeping frost. So I just have to keep him at a distance. Stain jumped back, creating space. Another child. The fire and ice user. You have good friends, Ingenium. Better than you deserve. Todoroki, watch out. Ida cried from the ground. He's fast. So is Midoriya, Todoroki noted, glancing at the green sparks still dancing around Izuku. I've never seen him move like that. He predicted my path, Izuku said, breathing heavily. He figured out my ricochet pattern. I can't keep doing the same thing. Then don't, Todoroki said. He unleashed a massive wave of ice, a glacier designed to crush Stain against the back wall. Stain cut through the ice with terrifying precision, leaping through the shattered shards. He was closing in on Todoroki. Midoriya! Todoroki shouted. Flank him! Izuku was already moving, but the alley was now cluttered with jagged ice. The smooth walls were gone. The floor was slippery. Wait, slippery. Izuku looked at the ice. Friction was the enemy of speed. Friction caused heat. Friction slowed him down. What if I don't need to bounce? Izuku jumped onto the slope of the ice glacier Todoroki had created. He didn't try to run. He angled his iron saws. He began to slide. Like a bobsledder on a championship track, Izuku accelerated down the curved ice ramp. The lack of friction meant he wasn't losing any velocity. He was gaining it. Gravity 5% cowl 0 friction. Stain was engaging Todoroki, dodging fire blasts and slicing through ice spears. He had Todoroki on the defensive. He raised his blade to slash Todoroki's arm. Whoosh! A green blur shot past Stain, moving faster than sound in the confined space. Izuku didn't hit him. He sped past him, rode the curve of the ice up the wall, did a loop-de-loop, and came back down. He was building speed. He was a particle in a cyclotron. Todoroki! Make a ramp! Izuku screamed as he circled back. Todoroki understood instantly. He slammed his hand on the ground. A smooth, curved ribbon of ice spiraled up from the ground, arching over Stain's head. Izuku hit the ramp. He accelerated. He was going so fast now that the world was just streaks of gray and white. The G-force pressed against him, trying to crush him into the ice, but he held his frame. Stain looked up. He lost track of the boy. The sound was everywhere at once, the grinding of metal on ice. Izuku reached the peak of the ramp, 20 feet in the air, directly above Stain. He launched. He wasn't falling. He was a missile. He began to spin. A forward somersault, tighter and tighter, increasing the rotational velocity. Centripetal force. Focus the impact on the heel. Stain! Izuku roared. Stain looked up. He raised his katana to block. It was a mistake. You can't block a meteor. Izuku's heel caught the flat of the blade, driving it down. The sword shattered into shrapnel. Izuku's leg continued, slamming into Stain's shoulder and chest. Detroit. Meteor! Crack! The impact was visceral. A shockwave of condensed air exploded outward, shattering the nearby windows and cracking the asphalt beneath Stain's feet. The villain was driven into the ground as if by a giant hammer. The pavement cratered. Izuku rebounded off the impact, flipping backward and landing in a crouch next to Todoroki. Stain lay in the center of the crater. He twitched once, groaned, and then fell silent. His eyes rolled back into his head. The silence that followed was heavy. Todoroki lowered his hand, the flames on his left side dying out. He looked at the unconscious villain, then at the shattered ground, and finally at Izuku. Izuku was shaking. His leg, the one he'd kicked with, was trembling violently. The iron sole of his shoe was glowing red-hot from the air friction, sizzling against the wet pavement. Midoriya, Todoroki said quietly. I didn't break it, Izuku gasped, clutching his knee. I didn't break the bone. Just bruised. Ida stared from the ground. He had watched the whole thing. He had seen the way Izuku moved, not with the overwhelming, godlike strength of All Might, but with a desperate, calculated, terrifying speed. Izuku had turned himself into a weapon. You were too fast to see, Ida whispered. Izuku limped over to Ida. Are you okay? Can you move yet? Ida looked down. Shame burned in his chest. He had come here for revenge. He had been ready to throw his life away. And Izuku. Izuku had mastered his own weakness to save him. I can't move. The paralysis should wear off soon, Native groaned from the wall. He hit me a while ago. Sirens wailed in the distance. The pros were coming. Izuku slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting. The adrenaline was crashing. His legs felt like jelly. We need to tie him up, Todoroki said pragmatically, searching for rope or wire. Before he wakes up. They used the rope Stain carried. As they secured the villain, the sounds of the city fire grew closer. Suddenly, a group of pro-heroes turned the corner. Gran Torino was leading them. Kid! Gran Torino shouted, zooming in. He stopped, looking at the scene. The ice. The crater. The unconscious hero killer. You! Gran Torino looked at Izuku, then at the crater. He saw the scuff marks on the walls, high up near the third story. He saw the melted rubber on the pavement. I told you to stay on the train, Gran Torino sighed, but there was no heat in it. He walked over and kicked the unconscious Stain lightly. You took down the hero killer? We did, Izuku corrected, gesturing to Todoroki and Ida. It was 3 against 1. Hardly, Todoroki muttered. I just built the slide. Midoriya became the bullet. Gran Torino looked at Izuku's legs. He saw the glowing iron soles. You're reckless, the old hero grumbled. You reached terminal velocity in a confined space. If you had missed, you'd be paced. I calculated the angle, Izuku said weakly. Calculated, Gran Torino scoffed, but he patted Izuku on the head. You're crazy. But you're fast. As the other pros secured the scene, a large, winged Noma swooped down from the sky, snatching Izuku before anyone could react. Midoriya! The Noma screeched, carrying Izuku up toward the rooftops. Izuku was exhausted. He couldn't break the grip. The claws were digging into his shoulders. I have no energy left. I can't blast away. Suddenly, the gnome jerked. A knife protruded from its brain. Stain. The hero killer had licked the blood of the gnome from a distinct cut on its cheek. When had he done that? Even bound, even defeated, the man's conviction was terrifying. The gnome paralyzed, falling from the sky. Izuku fell with it. He was falling from 3 stories up. No energy for full cowl. Roll. He hit the ground, executing a perfect parkour roll, absorbing the impact, and coming to a stop at the feet of the pro heroes. Stain stood there, having cut his ropes with a hidden blade, glaring at the heroes. His aura exploded outward, a terrifying hallucinogenic pressure that made seasoned pros step back in fear. False heroes. Stain rasped, stumbling forward. The only one, worthy to kill me, is All Might. He took a step toward Izuku. And this boy. Stain collapsed. His lung had been punctured by his own broken rib from Izuku's kick. He fell unconscious, remaining standing for a moment before toppling over. The pressure vanished. Izuku lay on the ground, staring at the sky. He acknowledged you, Todoroki said, helping Ida up. I don't care, Izuku whispered, closing his eyes. I just want new shoes. Ida looked at his friend. He saw the smoke rising from Izuku's heels. He looked at his own engines designed for speed, for power. And yet, tonight, he had been stationary. He overtook me, Ida thought, a bitter taste in his mouth mixed with immense gratitude. He didn't just run. He flew. I have to rethink everything. Izuku drifted into unconsciousness, the sound of Gran Torino yelling at the police fading into the background. He had survived Hosu. He had survived the hero killer. But more importantly, he had proven his theory. He didn't need to be a wall. He just needed to be fast enough to break through one. The smell of burning rubber had become Izuku Midoriya's constant companion. It was a sharp, acrid scent, distinct from the sulfur of Bakugo's explosions, or the metallic tang of blood he tasted in Hosu. It was the smell of friction. It was the smell of the world trying to slow him down, and his equipment failing to keep up. Izuku sat on a stool in the UA development studio, watching Mei Hatsum with a mixture of awe and terror. She was currently holding his red sneakers under a magnifying glass, her zoom lens quirk whirring audibly as she inspected the damage. It's tragic, Hatsum declared, straightening up and wiping grease on her overalls. Absolutely tragic. These babies were designed for standard hero work. Walking, running, the occasional kick. You, Midoriya, are treating them like brake pads on a bullet train. Izuku scratched the back of his head, looking guilty. I know, Hatsum. But Gran Torino taught me that my mobility comes from traction. I need to grip the walls, the floor, everything. When I change direction at 5% or 8%, the sheer force is tearing the polymer apart. Hatsum finished, her eyes gleaming. She grabbed a tablet. You don't need shoes. You need landing gear. She began sketching furiously. You're focusing on velocity, right? Speed over power. Kinetic impact over raw strength. I heard about what happened in Hosu, off the record, of course. They say you were bouncing around like a pachinko ball. It's the only way I can fight, Izuku admitted. He looked down at his legs. Under the gym pants, his muscles were sore, a deep, thrumming ache that never quite went away. Since returning from the internship, his body had changed. His upper body was still lean, but his legs had thickened, the muscle fibers dense and coiled. He felt heavy, yet light at the same time. All Might. His style is about planting roots. He stands his ground and the world moves around him. I can't do that. If I stand still, I break. I have to be the wind. Poetic, Hatsum dismissed, tossing a wrench into a pile of scrap. But wind doesn't need friction. You do. If you want to run up walls and ricochet off steel beams, you need iron saws. She pulled a prototype from a shelf. It looked clunky, heavy. This is version 1, she said, shoving it into his chest. Shock absorption coils in the heel. Reinforced iron plating along the instep and outer edge for cutting the air and protecting your foot during high-speed impacts. And the tread? It's a synthetic compound I developed for race cars. It won't melt until you hit Mach 1. Izuku's eyes sparkled. Mach 1? Hypothetically. She laughed maniacally. Now put them on. We have testing to do. When Izuku returned to the Class 1A Heights Alliance dorms, or rather, the classroom, as the dorms were still being discussed by the faculty, the atmosphere was different. The internship week had changed everyone. Kirishima and Siro were laughing about their patrols, but there was a hardness in their eyes that hadn't been there before. Uraraka had a terrifying aura of martial arts discipline surrounding her, but the elephant in the room was the Stain trio. Izuku, Ida, and Todoroki sat at their desks. On the surface, they were fine. But the class had seen the news. They knew the hero killer had been taken down in Hosu, and while the official story credited Endeavor, the injuries on their classmates told a different story. Midoriya, Kirishima said, leaning over his desk. Dude. You look different. Izuku looked up from his notebook. He was vibrating. It was a subtle thing, a constant, low-frequency tremor in his leg. He was tapping his foot at a speed that made it look like a blur. Different? How? You're bigger, Kaminari chimed in, pointing a finger. Not like All Might bigger. But your legs. They look like tree trunks. And you're kinda buzzing. It's full cowling, Izuku explained, though he kept his voice down. I'm trying to keep the engine idling. If I turn it off, it takes a split second to turn it back on. In a fight, that split second is the difference between dodging and getting hit. Man, you're intense, Siro grinned. I barely survived my internship, and you're already optimizing your idle animations. Across the room, Tenya Ida was staring at his hands. He looked up, catching Izuku's eye. There was a complex emotion there. Gratitude, yes. But also a fierce, burning competitiveness. In the alleyway, Ida had been the victim. He had been the one on the ground, watching Izuku fly. Ida was the runner. His quirk was literally engine. Speed was his identity. And yet, Izuku had outpaced him. Midoriya, Ida said, standing up. The class went quiet. Today's foundational heroics. Rescue race training at Field Gamma. I look forward to seeing your progress. It was a challenge. Polite, formal, but a challenge nonetheless. Yeah, Izuku said, stopping his leg from shaking. He stood up. The heavy iron saws clanked against the floor. Me too, Ida. From the front row, Katsuki Bakugo sat silently. He didn't turn around. He was staring at the chalkboard, his pen gripped so tightly it was bending. He had watched the news clips. He had seen the blurry footage of the flying student that leaked on forums. Deku. Bakugo thought, the name tasting like bile. You think because you learned to run away fast you're strong? You're just a bug. And bugs get squashed. Field Gamma was a labyrinth. It was a dense industrial nightmare of tangled pipes, steel girders, towering silos, and narrow catwalks. It was designed to simulate a factory district, a place where mobility was restricted and line of sight was broken constantly. All Might stood at the surveillance station, his smile beaming but his eyes sharp. Beside him stood Aizawa, looking bored as usual. Today's training is simple, All Might announced, his voice booming over the speakers. A race. You will start at the perimeter and race to the central rescue point. But this is Field Gamma. It is a maze. Finding the most efficient route is key. Minimizing damage to the surroundings is also priority. The first group was called up. Group 1 Siro Hanta, Ojiro Mashireo, Mina Ishido, Tenya Ida, Izuku Midoriya. Whoa, Kaminari whispered from the observation deck. That's a stacked mobility group. Siro can swing, Ishido can slide, and Ojiro has the tail for parkour, Kirishima analyzed. But it's gotta be Ida, right? In a straight line, he's the fastest. But this isn't a straight line, Uraraka murmured, watching the screen. Look at the terrain. Down on the field, the 5 students lined up. Ida revved his engines. The blue flames sputtered and roared. I will not lose, he stated, adjusting his glasses. Midoriya. Don't hold back. I won't, Izuku said. He crouched low. His stance was weird. Siro and Ishido were in sprinter crouches. Ida was in a high start position. Izuku was almost on all fours, like a frog or a predator waiting to pounce. Green lightning crackled around him, brighter than before. Start! The horn blared. Boom! Ida was gone. His recipro burst was instantaneous. He tore down the main avenue of the factory district, leaving a cloud of dust. Ciro launched tape, swinging high. Ashido began skating on her acid. Izuku didn't run forward. He ran sideways. He launched himself at the wall of the nearest warehouse. To the shock of everyone watching, he didn't bounce off. He ran along it. He's wall running? Mineta shrieked. Izuku's new iron saws dug into the concrete. He was perpendicular to the ground, sprinting horizontally 15 feet in the air. Friction, Izuku calculated. The extra weight of the shoes helps create downforce when I'm at this angle. Keep the speed above 40 km per hour or gravity wins. He saw a maze of pipes ahead. Ida, on the ground, had to turn a sharp 90-degree corner. He skidded, losing momentum, his engine sputtering as he fought the turn. Izuku didn't turn. He saw the pipes. He jumped. Ricochet. He bounced off a water tower, changed his angle, and shot through the gap in the pipes. He was moving in 3 dimensions while Ida was stuck in 2. Amazing, Gyorosa noted, her eyes glued to the screen. Ida is faster in terms of raw miles per hour. But Midoriya, his displacement is superior. He's taking the hypotenuse while Ida takes the legs of the triangle. Izuku felt the wind rushing past his ears. The world was a blur of gray steel and rust. He saw Ciro ahead, swinging gracefully. Sorry, Ciro. Izuku called out. Why? Ciro looked back. Izuku landed on the same girder Ciro was attached to. Instead of running past, Izuku used the girder as a springboard. He stomped down, impact, and launched himself higher. The vibration shook Ciro's tape loose. Hey! Ciro yelled, falling into a safety net of tape. Izuku was soaring now. He was above the factory. He could see the finish line, a platform in the center, but Ida was there too. Ida had reached the straightaway leading to the center. His engines were screaming, blue flames turning white. He was a bullet train. I won't let you beat me! Ida roared, pushing his engines to the limit. Izuku was in the air, falling toward the finish. But his trajectory was off. He was going to land short. I need one more jump. There was nothing in the air to jump off of. Wait! The wind, Gran Torino had said. I use air pressure. Izuku couldn't shoot air from his feet. But he could kick hard enough to create pressure. Delaware smash. Air force. Leg style. Izuku snapped his leg. He flicked his toes with 15% power, creating a compressed blast of wind. It wasn't enough to fly, but it was enough to nudge him. Push. The air blast shoved him forward just a few meters. He tucked into a roll. Ida slammed onto the platform, skidding to a halt. I did it! Check again! All Might's voice rang out. Ida looked up. Izuku was already standing there, wiping dust off his shoulder. He wasn't panting hard. He was just vibrating. Midoriya. Ida gasped. When? I came from above, Izuku said, pointing to the sky. You were fast, Ida. Really fast. But you had to go around the silos. I went over them. The buzzer sounded. Izuku first place. Back in the observation room, the class was erupting. That was insane! Kirishima yelled. He moves like a ninja. Bakugo didn't say a word. He stood up, kicked his chair over, and stormed out of the room. Young Bakugo seems displeased, All Might noted, watching the boy leave. Aizawa sighed. His pride is being tested. He's used to Midoriya being a pebble in his path. Now the pebble is a bullet. It's a paradigm shift he hasn't processed. Later that afternoon, during the free training period in the beta gym, the tension finally snapped. Izuku was practicing his landing rolls, trying to minimize the impact on his knees. He was focused, muttering equations about shock absorption. Deku. Izuku froze. He knew that tone. It wasn't the usual angry barking. It was lower, dangerous. Like a lit fuse sizzling down to the powder keg. He stood up and turned. Katsuki Bakugo stood 10 meters away, gauntlets on. His palms were crackling with small, popping explosions. Kaken, Izuku said, straightening his posture. If you want to talk, talk? Bakugo scoffed. He took a step forward. I don't want to talk. I want to know when you decided to look down on me. I'm not looking down on you. Izuku protested, hands up. I'm just trying to get stronger. I'm trying to figure out my own style. Your own style? Bakugo spat. You copy All Might. You copy the old man. You even copy that Four Eyes with his running. You're nothing but a copycat. Bakugo raised a gauntlet. Let's see if you can copy this. He lunged. It was a classic Bakugo opener, a right hook fueled by a massive explosion. It was fast, violent, and usually unavoidable, but Izuku had been watching Bakugo his entire life. And for the last week, he had been dodging a man who moved faster than the eye could see. To Izuku, Bakugo looked manageable. He's leading with the right. He's putting all his weight forward. Izuku didn't block. He didn't step back. He stepped in. He dropped his weight, sliding under the swinging arm. The heat of the explosion singed his hair, but the blast wave passed harmlessly overhead. What? Bakugo growled. Izuku was now inside Bakugo's guard. In the past, Izuku would have tried to punch or grab. But that would invite a counter-explosion. Don't engage. Disorient. Izuku spun. He used his shoulder to check Bakugo's chest. Not a hard hit, just a nudge. At the same time, he used his foot to hook Bakugo's ankle. Physics took over. Bakugo's forward momentum. Izuku's trip equals loss of balance. Bakugo stumbled, flailing. He caught himself with a blast to the floor, flipping back to his feet. His face was twisted in pure rage. You little rat! Bakugo unleashed a barrage. Boom. 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 He filled the air with smoke and fire, turning the gym into a war zone. He was carpet-bombing the area, trying to catch Izuku in the blast radius. But Izuku was the rubber ball. He bounced off the walls, staying high. He moved in zigzags, never staying in one spot long enough for Bakugo to lock on. He's getting frustrated, Izuku analyzed, watching Bakugo's movements become wider, sloppier. He's used to people being afraid of the explosions. He expects me to freeze, but if I keep moving, the smoke actually helps me. Izuku dove into the smoke cloud. Bakugo fired blindly to his left. Die! Izuku was on his right. Over here, Kaken! Bakugo spun, firing a massive blast. Izuku was already behind him. It was a game of cat and mouse, but the mouse was supersonic. Bakugo was expending massive amounts of energy, sweating profusely, his breathing ragged. Izuku was tired too, but he hadn't taken a hit yet. Stop running and fight me! Bakugo screamed, his voice cracking. He stood in the center of the gym, chest heaving. Coward! All you do is run! Izuku stopped. He landed on the floor, 5 meters from Bakugo. The green lightning hissed. I am fighting, Izuku said, his voice surprisingly calm. I'm fighting the way I need to. I can't take your hits, Kaken. Your explosions, they really hurt. If I take one I might lose, so I decided I'm not going to take any. Don't mock me! Bakugo roared. He gathered a massive amount of sweat. He was going for a howitzer impact. He spun, creating a tornado of explosive force. This will catch you. You can't outrun a 360-degree blast. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He's right. I can't run around it. The area of effect is too big. Force equals mass x acceleration. If I can't go around it, I have to go through it before it fully detonates. Bakugo ignited the spark. Izuku moved. It was the fastest he had moved yet. He pushed full cowl to 8%. His muscles screamed. He shot straight toward Bakugo, diving into the eye of the storm. Just as the explosion began to bloom from Bakugo's palm, Izuku was there. He didn't punch Bakugo. He spun, delivering a high-speed roundhouse kick, not to Bakugo's body, but to the air directly in front of Bakugo's hand. Smash! Air cutter! The iron sole of his shoe sliced through the air at supersonic speed. The displacement created a vacuum blade, a sharp gust of wind pressure that cut right through the ignition point of the explosion. It disrupted the oxygen mixture. The explosion fizzled, turning into a pathetic pop and a cloud of black smoke. Bakugo froze. His ultimate move had been snuffed out. Izuku's leg was still extended, his shoes smoking. His heel was inches from Bakugo's nose. The wind pressure from the stop had cut a small, thin line on Bakugo's cheek. A single drop of blood welled up. Silence descended on the gym. Bakugo stared at the shoe. Then he looked at Izuku. Izuku lowered his leg. He was trembling. That last move had hurt. His shin felt like it was splitting. I'm not chasing you anymore, Kaken, Izuku said softly. I'm going my own way. Try to keep up. Bakugo's eyes were wide, the pupils trembling. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked shaken. The reality of the gap, not in power, but in evolution, had hit him. You! Bakugo started, but the words failed him. Enough! All Might's voice boomed from the entrance. The large hero deflated into his skeletal form as he walked in, coughing slightly. Unauthorized sparring, All Might scolded, though his tone was mild. And dangerous usage of quirks indoors. He looked at Bakugo. Young Bakugo, go cool off. We will discuss this later. Bakugo didn't argue. He wiped the blood from his cheek, gave Izuku one last, unreadable look, a mix of hatred and begrudging acknowledgement, and walked out. All Might turned to Izuku. Young Midoriya. I'm sorry, All Might, Izuku bowed. He challenged me, and I. You handled yourself well, All Might said, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Your movement, it reminds me of him. Gran Torino. Izuku smiled weakly. Yeah. He taught me a lot, but All Might's face grew serious. There is a danger. Danger? Speed is a powerful weapon, All Might said, leading Izuku toward the benches. But it is an addiction. When you move that fast, the world slows down for you. You feel untouchable. All Might pointed to his own eyes. But the human eye has limits. The brain has limits. When you move at high velocity, your vision narrows. It's called tunnel vision. You see the goal. You see the enemy, but you lose your peripheral awareness. Izuku thought back to the alleyway with Stain. He had been so focused on Stain's blade that he hadn't seen the throwing knives until almost too late. You beat young Bakugo because he was a singular target, All Might continued. But what if there were civilians in the room? What if there was a second villain hiding in the shadows? If you move so fast that you blur the world, you might miss the things you are supposed to protect. All Might squeezed Izuku's shoulder. You are becoming a bullet, my boy. But a bullet cannot change its mind once it is fired. You must learn to see everything, even when you are moving faster than sound. Otherwise, you might crash. Izuku looked at his hands. He looked at the scarred skin, then at the smoking iron soles. Tunnel vision. He nodded. I understand. I need to train my eyes. I need to process information faster. Exactly, All Might smiled. But for now, maybe go see Recovery Girl. Your legs are shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Izuku laughed nervously. Yeah. They are. As he hobbled toward the nurse's office, Izuku felt a strange sense of peace. The friction with Bakugo hadn't vanished, but it had changed. It wasn't the friction of a bully crushing a victim anymore. It was the friction of two stones grinding against each other, sharpening. And as for the friction of the world trying to slow him down, he looked at his iron soles. I just need to run faster than the friction, he thought. I need to break the sound barrier.